podcast where we put you on the map. This is Ron Costa broadcasting live from the Mappable USA studios in Las Vegas, Nevada. And today, folks, we're going to talk about three things about opportunity zones that nobody is bringing up, but we're going to bring it up today in shows. So before we do that, let's introduce Vicki Hutchmala from the QOZ Marketplace. Vicki, how are you today?
Doing great today, Ron. Another fabulous day in Vegas. Getting hot, getting cool, hasn't decided what it wants to do, so we're taking advantage of it at this time. But we have an excellent guest today. He's new, and our first time with him, and we're going, like you said, we're going to talk about opportunity zones, investing in them, and the impact that they have on the projects that they're doing. So I think we should get started.
Sounds good. Let's bring him on. Folks, this is Brion Crum. He's the Vice President of Wealth Development at the Caliber Funds. Brion, how are you doing today?
Ron and Vicki, I am doing fantastic. Thank you so much for offering this opportunity for me to share what Caliber is doing in opportunity zones.
Our pleasure, Brion.
Absolutely.
Always our pleasure.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at all these opportunity zones out there, Caliber seems to be one of the bigger ones. And I know you guys are working on a lot of projects and everything, but before we get into this whole thing, maybe you can go into your background a little bit and tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, Ron, thanks a lot for offering that opportunity to me. Before I started getting into real estate investing with Caliber Funds, my background was really related to two different industries. One of them was hospitality, where I was on the opening team for what became one of the world-class resorts in Scottsdale, Arizona, called the Royal Palms Resort and Spa. It's now an exclusive property within Hyatt. So I learned the hospitality industry from the ground up for the first 15 years of my professional career. And then I also have a background in financial planning, both at independent firms as well as with large institutions like ING, which is now Voya, as well as Merrill Lynch. And I'm fortunate now at Caliber to be able to bring my background of hospitality, operations and management, and financial investment experience all together in one place. And as you may know, one of Caliber's investments, and it's turning out to be very successful, is actually an opportunity zone-focused hospitality play where Caliber built the Tucson Convention Center in an opportunity zone in Tucson very recently.
Excellent.
Yeah, no question. You know, you mentioned in your overview there, you ever notice that whenever you say like resort and spa, it doesn't even matter what it's named. It's always just great. Those are just two great words.
It sounds relaxing. like we want to go there. Like I want to be at a resort and spa.
Exactly. I want to live there forever.
But okay. So then, how'd you hook up with Caliber then?
Well, when I did my transition from hospitality into financial services, it was in 2010. We were coming off the depths of the recession. Hospitality got hit pretty hard. Real estate got hit pretty hard, especially in the Phoenix area, just like it did in Vegas. And I met Chris Loeffler, our founder and CEO of Caliber Companies, at a Scottsdale Chamber event in 2014. And at that point, I was really kind of exploring what my alternatives were to traditional financial services, because as I mentioned, I transitioned from hospitality into financial services. I was working at Merrill Lynch, and I just kind of lost the passion for traditional financial planning. And I met Chris. I heard the entrepreneurial, innovative story about Caliber being created to help investors take advantage of buying opportunities in residential and commercial real estate from the recession. And at the time, Caliber had just bought its second hotel. And these hotel plays were really a way to take advantage of a displacement in the financing that was available for hotels. So Caliber started building up a portfolio of distressed hotels as well as apartment complexes. And it just sounded like a more interesting investment for me, where I could help a successful local business person in Arizona invest locally, invest directly back into the community instead of sending that money back to Wall Street, which is really my only choice that I had when I was working at Merrill Lynch. So being able to meet Chris at a really crucial junction point in my career is what led me to come on board with the team at Caliber in 2014.
Very interesting. So tell us about Caliber and what it does, the types of projects in that you invest in opportunity zones, and what part of the country are you focused in Scottsdale?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And before I do that, I'm going to give a little bit of a background on Caliber, because when the Opportunity Zone program was announced and created at the end of 2017, Caliber basically looked at our entire business model, which, as I mentioned earlier, was really offering investors the opportunity to take advantage of distressed real estate. And that traditionally meant we would either acquire or build hotels, apartment complexes, office buildings, and depending on where it was located, it would determine which one of the funds it would go into. So when the Opportunity Zone program was created, Caliber looked at our entire portfolio. We looked at where we were investing. We looked at the types of investments we were making and realized, oh my gosh, we're making investments in opportunity zones as they were designated in Arizona in particular. We were meeting the rules and requirements of the program because it was either an acquisition with extensive renovation, so we met the substantial improvement rules, or it was ground-up development. And at that point, Caliber decided that we needed to open up an Opportunity Zone fund on behalf of our investors. And because of that, it's safe to say that we're definitely one of the first diversified asset managers in the country to launch an active Opportunity Zone fund.
Wow,
so now I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about the types of investments that we're making in the locations. Caliber is headquartered in Scottsdale, Arizona, and that's one of the suburbs of Phoenix. So at this point, the majority of the Caliber Opportunity Zone Fund is invested in Arizona. However, we did recently make a transition and we started making investments in Texas. And then outside of the Opportunity Zone program, Caliber's largest investments are north of Denver, Colorado. And I'm actually doing this call with you today from Boulder, Colorado, which is only about 40 minutes away from Caliber's largest development projects that are not in an opportunity zone, but it is part of our overall business strategy to identify great real estate opportunities. And if it is in an opportunity zone, then we'll take advantage of that. And if it's not, we'll just use it as a more traditional real estate investment.
Well, that sounds exciting. You know, there's aside from opportunity zones, you know, you have real estate trusts and you have 1031 exchanges. So there are programs out there prior to the Opportunity Zone program that, you know, could help investors and help folks who had real estate and how to deal with it more economically, more effectively to their advantage. But the Opportunity Zone program came along and of course it offers the tax deferment, but I personally think that's more like icing on the cake, that the real impact of the program is how the ability to work in areas that are distressed and the ability to elevate those communities and the residents of those communities to give them a higher quality of life, which is what I really like about the Opportunity Zone program. What do you think?
Yeah, Vicki, I agree with you 100%. And I'm going to start breaking down some of the investments we made. And when I do that, I'm going to put a focus not just on potential adaptive reuse of some of them, but also the actual impact that we're having on the community. And as you mentioned, it's not just about the tax advantages. It's also making sure that you're offering really good investment opportunities to your investors. And in most situations, it is related to the real estate itself. The Caliber has made a couple equity investments directly into operating companies that decided to expand into opportunity zones that also had other benefits for the community, whether it was job creation or helping people, start and grow businesses like we're doing with the co-working space. So I'm going to go ahead and share with you a couple of the specific projects that Caliber has undertaken. And let me know if you have any questions along the way.
Well, let's just start off. Brian, let's start off with a quick question right off the bat. You mentioned
Sure,
effective
absolutely.
adaptive reuse, right?
Yes.
What is that exactly? Before we get into an example of that, what's your definition of that?
It's looking at what the property is being used for currently, and then identifying whether is this a vacant building, or is this a business that might not be an ongoing concern. So if Caliber within our Opportunity Zone Fund can acquire that property, what is the next best use for that property that we can do meeting the rules of the program, which means that we typically are going to buy a property, do a pretty significant renovation, and repurpose it into another asset class.
Okay, great. Sounds good.
Yeah. And because Arizona is a newer state than a lot of places, I mean, something in Arizona that's considered to be historic could have been built in the 1950s. Caliber isn't buying buildings or build anywhere between the 20s and the 70s and doing pretty extensive renovations on them as we're doing these conversions. But there are opportunity zones across the country where you might literally be involved in a historic renovation where you could overlay some historic tax credits. I mean, I originally grew up in Ohio, grew up in a farmhouse that was built in 1850. I mean, there was almost nothing that was built in Arizona during that time frame. So adaptive reuse is going to have a different meaning and a different terminology depending if you're in a rural area, an urban area. Are you in Philadelphia where there are properties from the 1600s and 1700s, or are you in a newer area like we are in Arizona or Las Vegas area where you guys are? So here's an example of Caliber buying a vacant building that was originally built as an assisted living facility for a pretty large nonprofit. When that nonprofit expanded several years ago, it left a vacant assisted living facility in between a really nice historic neighborhood in Central Phoenix and directly across from the street from one of the largest hospitals in the Phoenix area. Wow. So what Caliber did within the framework of the Opportunity Zone program, we were approached by the operator, a very successful, profitable operator that had built and operated at least 4 or 5 behavioral health care hospitals in the Midwest. And they identified that Arizona and the Phoenix area in particular was dramatically underrepresented when it comes to behavioral health care beds. There's nearly 5 million people living in the greater Phoenix area, and before Caliber built our hospital, which has about 96 beds, there was less than 500 beds for those 5 million people for behavioral health. So dramatically underrepresented. So Caliber was able to buy a vacant building where people were living, doing drugs, and they were homeless, and we were able to convert it into a brand new behavioral health care hospital, which from an economic development standpoint creates nearly 100 jobs. But on top of that, it's also helping thousands of people actually get the mental health care treatment that they really have needed. So that's one of my favorite stories about what Caliber's been doing in the renovation of different buildings where, this building had been vacant for several years. Other investors had looked at it, couldn't make it work as a traditional multifamily conversion, but we were able to take a look at the floor plan, the location, and do that adaptive, renovation and convert it from a vacant assisted living facility into a behavioral health care hospital. And we're always looking for more opportunities like that in opportunity zones.
Thinking outside the box, Brian.
It's definitely outside the box. Although one of the stories I'm going to tell you about is literally building a box inside of a box. But we'll learn more about that.
Okay, that sounds
later.
Interesting. So what did you do?
And so for anyone that's listening and they're not familiar with the greater Phoenix area, back over a decade ago, Phoenix started building a light rail transit system. Now, this light rail system started in downtown Phoenix and then connected with Tempe, Arizona, which is where Arizona State University is headquartered, and then continued further east into Mesa. Mesa, Arizona is, I think, the 34th largest city in the country that many people have never heard of. Nearly 500,000 people live there, It is the largest direct suburb connected to the city of Phoenix. What Caliber had identified several years ago, right around the time the Opportunity Zone program was created, was that the city of Mesa in their downtown core area hadn't really taken advantage of the fact that they had light rail, a rapid transit system like Phoenix and Tempe did. Tempe really revitalized downtown Tempe near Arizona State University because of expanded light rail access, and the same thing happened for downtown Phoenix. But Mesa had kind of been left behind. Downtown Mesa started to turn into a ghost town back in the 80s when, the big malls started getting developed and the local stores started moving out to the suburbs. So what Caliber did was buy 10 buildings, some of them actually connected to each other, on the light rail in downtown Mesa, Arizona, which is an opportunity zone that is several miles wide and several miles long and a couple miles wide. In downtown Mesa, one of the buildings was actually built so strongly that it was used as a bomb shelter during World War II.
Oh my gosh!
So this is really there's some super cool history about downtown Mesa that I'll get into on some of the other projects. But the one where we're literally building boxes within boxes is related to a property that, as I mentioned earlier, used to be a bomb shelter in the basement. It's a one-story building, and what Caliber is going to do is use a very innovative new modular construction company that we made an investment in and build apartments and stack them on top of each other to go vertical and build more apartments in downtown Mesa. So
nice.
This is a really interesting project. Yep, and a few years ago, before the Opportunity Zone program was started, I think, Arizona had made the decision that we were going to shut down one of our coal-fired power plants. So now we have basically it's an empty building on light rail. This was the building that was used to transfer coal from the train into the boilers for the Navajo Generating Power Station. So this power station was shut down a couple of years ago. Hundreds of jobs were lost, and these were all in the tribal community. It's in the Navajo Nation. And as you may or may not know, the majority of Opportunity Zone funds, the largest geographic area of Opportunity Zone funds, of Opportunity Zones in Arizona are actual tribal communities, many of them rural.
Right.
So now we have an opportunity to go into a rural community, repurpose an old coal-fired power plant and convert it into a building that is going to be used to manufacture very cool, contemporary, energy-efficient, sustainable manufactured housing units. It can be then shipped into the Opportunity Zone in downtown Mesa and used to build an apartment complex.
Oh, very nice. So you created an Opportunity Zone business to impact opportunity zones in Mesa, but also there, even though there's more opportunity zones a lot in the tribal areas and reservations of Arizona, they need a lot of help as well within the reservations for housing and business development and that too. So you kind of just hit all of the bricks at the same time with what you're doing. And that project that you just were talking about, is that the Zeni home project?
It is, yes. So the company, the Caliber, through our Opportunity Zone Fund, has made an equity investment directly into the company to help them grow and expand. It's called Zeni Home, Zenni Home. Zeni Home is a very innovative designer and manufacturer of modular factory-built homes. These are easily transported. They have a minimal environmental footprint. And in downtown Mesa in particular, we're using them to be stacked on top of each other to build about 90 units of multifamily housing.
And you're repurposing the steel and whatever you can from the coal plant that was shut down. So that's great too. Recycling.
Correct, yeah. Yes. So this is a great example of adaptive reuse. where if we hadn't come up with this business plan in conjunction with the founders of Zeni Home, that whole power plant may have just been torn down, and there may have been no better use for it. So this is an example
it would have wasted.
Where now, yeah, it would have been the whole opportunity, the location, the fact that there's hundreds of people that were working at a power plant that can now be trained into manufacturing in the construction industry, which is hard to argue that there isn't a bigger need for any industry for more workers than construction at this point. It's one of the things that keeps leading to higher construction costs. It's not just the materials, it's not just the value of the land going up because of imbalances between supply and demand, but it's also labor shortages in just about every aspect of the home building process.
Exactly, and you're you're teaching a skill and a trade to someone who will enhance his future life, but doesn't need a college degree and doesn't need any formal higher education, because he learns from what you're teaching him and the skills in that, but learning on the job and construction jobs and trade jobs, they make a lot of money. So they're very lucrative. That is also another benefit to what you're doing with the Zeni Homes and Caliber and what you're doing in Arizona. That's great.
Yeah, we're really excited about the positive benefit it can have, not just for investors, but the job creation, the job training, the fact that these will be, these units from Zeni Home, they don't have to be stacked on top of each other to build apartments. They can be used as accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, which if you're in an opportunity zone on the West Coast, the states of California, I believe Oregon and Washington, a lot of them have removed restrictions from letting people build these, what are called ohanas in Hawaii, but accessory dwelling units that can be used to help eliminate a little bit of this affordable housing crisis. So the city of Phoenix recently started discussing allowing these ADUs to be used in single-family residential lots. So these Zeni homes can be used in both urban and even rural areas where they could literally be off-grid. They can come with solar. They can come with solar-powered water systems, which is really interesting. And it can really be used once we prove the business model works out in Arizona and replicated across the country.
And that's another benefit of what you're doing. And if you, because they're smaller, you can put these on a larger residential lot and have a second dwelling or an income generating source for to the resident or owner of the property where he lives. He now has an income generating property as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, these would be really good if someone was planning to build like a casita, which if you build it, more traditionally, these are pretty expensive per square foot. So yeah, you could put a Zeni home as an ADU in your yard and use it as an Airbnb rental, as an example.
Exactly. Yeah, that's great.
That is a great idea. It's really pretty cool. Brian, all these examples, and we're talking about this adaptive reuse concept. Well, why isn't every opportunity zone doing this? Is it a matter of resources, or I know you guys have a lot of money and you're a big fund, but this is something that every opportunity zone fund should be looking at, I would think, right?
The opportunity zone world has really been bifurcated into what I consider three different types of funds. The first one are these large institutional funds, which are pretty much only going to do, traditional ground up, mixed use, Class A, maybe multifamily or hospitality. And a lot of that is not going to be at the local scale. So, what Caliber is doing as a middle market opportunity zone fund operator, we have a lot more flexibility. We're seeing these deals get brought to us. Very few of the projects that Caliber is working on, we created ourselves. So innovative developers or building owners identified the fact that they were in an opportunity zone. and they thought there was a better use for the property that they owned or that they were looking to invest into, and then they would approach Caliber because of our profile in the Opportunity Zone Fund industry as one of the first diversified funds that has some flexibility in our business model where we don't only build hotels, we don't only build hospitals, we don't only build multifamily. So we've got that diversity inside of our product mix, which gives us that flexibility to look at a single building. And I'll use the example of the co-working space that we're going to be building in downtown Mesa. So I mentioned earlier that downtown Mesa is historic. A lot of those buildings were built between the 1920s and 1950s. One of the buildings was the first Woolworth's department store in downtown Mesa, which then when the malls were built and people started going to the suburbs for all their shopping, it had been turned into a family-owned antique store. When the Opportunity Zone Fund program was created, this became one of the buildings that Caliber bought. So we bought several antique stores in downtown Mesa, and one of them is being converted into a co-working space, which should have a grand opening in summer of this year, hopefully in August. And this is an example of a historic building that went through different uses throughout its life cycle, but now we're going to use it to help people start and launch a multitude of businesses. And you have to have a flexible business model in order to do that, because if you're an Opportunity Zone Fund that is focused only on ground-up multifamily, you're going to overlook these local examples of what can we do to have a positive impact in that particular opportunity zone in that location.
Yeah, I agree with that. So, we talked about this adaptive reuse and these equity investments and everything. Let's close this out with maybe something that nobody likes to talk about in terms of reporting of this. So this impact reporting. What do you guys do about that?
The way that the program was created, as you know, was really to have a positive impact on different communities. And the history of the Opportunity Zone program goes back to 2015 when members of the Economic Innovation Group got together and said, what if we could create an incentive to help people drive capital and create jobs in lost or forgotten communities that hadn't really seen the same level of success as other areas after the last recession. And when they did that, there was not a framework put in place for the actual reporting. It was only identify the opportunity zone and then make sure you're making a substantial improvement or ground-up investment or building a new business. But there wasn't any mandated reporting about what impact do we have on the community? How many jobs are you creating? What is the environmental impact? One of the rules of the Opportunity Zone program, in order for an Opportunity Zone to be actually qualified and considered to be an Opportunity Zone, had to do with the high rate of unemployment in that area based on the 2010 census. So what Caliber has done, we wanted to be proactive, not wait for the federal government to mandate this impact reporting. So there are several organizations that actually create these types of impact reports. Caliber chose to partner with JTC Americas, which was formerly NES Financial. They have been very active in many aspects of the Opportunity Zone program from the very beginning, just like Caliber has. So Caliber creates a quarterly impact report in conjunction with JTC Americas. And inside of that report, we're looking at business taxes, the change in the GDP for that specific project, how many jobs were created, both direct and indirect, and being able to measure that and then report not only on what we actually have made a positive impact on the community, but how did our plans for these improvements actually match up? Like, did we actually create the number of jobs or the actual reduction in energy consumption that we had intended? So we do have an impact report for every single Caliber project that's in our opportunity zones, and that is something that we share with our investors as well as people that are really interested in having their money make a difference in the community instead of just making a good financial return.
So,
Yes.
Brion, let me ask you a question. Aside from the opportunity zones, does Caliber contemplate new technology in terms of its real estate assets, using tokenization or blockchain to fund their projects?
I'm glad you asked that question. One of the projects that I didn't talk about earlier is in the planning phases, but Caliber has created a joint venture partnership with United Cities, which is a U.S.-based affiliate of the United Nations. And what we're going to do is create the United Cities U.S. headquarters in an opportunity zone. And within this smart city development, we are going to be looking at innovative ways to provide solutions for greater connectivity, greater sustainability, property technology, fintech. And I would not be surprised if some aspect of blockchain doesn't get involved with it, because some of our strategic partnerships are with large global organizations, including companies that have some of the most sustainable data centers in the world. And as you're probably well aware, a lot of things related to blockchain technology really come down to, one, can I create a really good use case that makes money for using blockchain compared to traditional technologies? And because of the really energy-intensive nature of blockchain, which is obviously not just related to cryptocurrency, but all blockchain requires an incredible amount of computing power and an incredible amount of data consumption. So I would not be surprised in the future if Caliber doesn't have several projects that are related to these innovative technologies in opportunity zones.
So where are you going to locate this United City headquarters? I mean, I would suggest Vegas.
So the good news here is that we're not going to build just one of these, smart cities. The first one is slated for Scottsdale, Arizona. It is on a tribal community in Scottsdale. So
interesting.
It's a great example. Yeah, it's a great example of collaboration, public-private partnerships. It's in the advanced planning stages. We did do a couple press releases, including one in conjunction with the Greater Phoenix Economic Council, which has really helped Arizona attract an amazing amount of businesses, both new businesses as well as expansions of some of the largest technology companies in the world, not just in America, that have chosen Phoenix as a point of expansion. So we're in the planning phases to build a smart city in an opportunity zone in Scottsdale, Arizona, on a tribal community.
Well, being on the reservation in tribal lands, that kind of, I don't know if it's a better thing, but it eliminates kind of government interference because it's on tribal land. That's very interesting. Keep in mind that tribes, are their own entity, so they have their own, they have their own, rules and things like that you have to follow. But the ones in Arizona in particular that we're working with are very innovative. They've done a lot of work to attract high-profile companies and projects to their communities. And part of the benefit of this, even before the Opportunity Zone program was created, is that there was always a focus on making sure that you were giving tribal members some of the first rights for those jobs. Exactly. Yeah, that's very interesting and very innovative. Putting it on tribal lands. That's I like that. That's great. What about do you do
Arizona,
agriculture? Do you have any agricultural projects?
Yeah, Caliber has not actively found an agricultural project, but we have definitely been looking at them because especially different types of urban agriculture can really fit into meeting several of the what are called United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. So Caliber definitely looks at innovative new business models inside of opportunity zones, and urban agriculture is something that we would definitely take a look at.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's really, really great, Brian. All this information that you've given us is just really it's making this Caliber Fund look really interesting to pursue and to get more information on. How would someone get more information if they wanted to find out more about the fund or yourself or whatever? How do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, thanks a lot for asking me that, Ron and Vicki. They can reach out to me directly. I'll give you my email address and my cell phone. It's Brion, Brion. Last name is Crum, Crum. My phone number is 480-881-1906. And my email address is Brion, Brion.Crum, Crum, at caliberco.com, caliberco.com.
Okay, great. Yeah, we'll link all that stuff on the show notes as well. And, I guess before I close this out, I got to tell people out there, when you're talking to Brian, don't let him fool you with his golf game, because he's actually a lot better than he wants you to believe. I've seen it. But on a more serious note, Vicki, what do you think about this podcast?
Oh, I think this is fabulous. We talk to a lot of people on our podcast about opportunity zones and what they're doing and how they're proceeding and what the future is and all of that. But what's interesting about this podcast with Brian is Caliber is making the most of opportunity zones as the program meant it to be. Caliber thinks outside of the box and goes into creative, innovative, interesting projects. And I have to say, Brian, I am so impressed, and congratulations to you and to Caliber for what you're doing in the opportunity space. It's fabulous. I love it.
Yeah, Vicki, I really appreciate that. I do want to point out one thing. We are going to be closing the Caliber Opportunity Zone Fund 1 at the end of June, and at which point we will immediately launch on July 1st the Caliber Opportunity Zone Fund 2. So
Excellent.
We're definitely going to keep looking for these innovative deals and getting Caliber in front of investors that are in a situation, whether it's from the sale of their business or from real estate or taking profits in the stock market. Last year, we had a handful of investors that sold out some of their Bitcoin when it peaked. So if we see a little bit of resurgence in cryptocurrencies, I could see a little more cryptocurrency profits going into the opportunity zones. So, yeah, we're really excited about everything that we're working on. If we've got 20 different deals, you can be assured that we've looked at probably 1,000 or more. So we're able to pick the best of the best deals that are out there. They're in this middle market space where we're not competing with a big institution and we're not replicating what a small local developer can do with one project. So I think we're really fitting this niche market about deals that are in the range of $5 million to $50 million that are too big for the small local developer and too small for the big institutional funds. And it's really given us an opportunity to do some really cool projects with, as I mentioned, that direct impact on the community.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that is a sweet spot.
Absolutely.
No doubt about it. Well, I hope that means with the new fund, Brian, that we'll get you on again on a podcast in the future as things develop.
Oh, that would be fantastic. I would definitely be looking forward to that. And at which point, I think I'll be able to share a few more cool things that we have in our due diligence pipeline.
Well, I
Excellent.
would hope you have more cool things to come.
Yes.
Lots more cool things to come.
Yep. All right. So, Brian, again, thanks so much for taking the time out and speaking to our audience and being a guest on the show. I really appreciate it. And, Vicki, thanks for co-hosting this episode. This was a really great episode as usual. And, folks, you're listening to the Mappable USA podcast at mappableusa.com. If you go to that website, you scroll down, you'll see all our syndication sources. Pick the one you like best. Subscribe, and you'll never miss another one of our episodes. If you like what you heard today, send us an email at info@mappableiusa.com, or just leave a comment on whatever page you're listening to on right now. So thanks for listening, everyone. Thanks for your support. We'll be at you next time at the Mappable USA podcast. Have a great week, everyone.